Last year you had talks about robots and sensors. Yes, they are coming. Yep. So the robots are coming, the drones are coming, yeah, more and more uses. You have lots of fantastic sensors, some are commercial, some are experimental, lots of information, okay? But I don't want to talk about these because this is information and data and platforms, or data and platforms. What I want to talk about is who's going to make the decisions and how we get to a decision system rather than just lots of data. So data is not information. Information is not a decision, but viticulture is about decisions. And this is what we miss. We get so excited about sensors and platforms and robots, and we have to keep coming back to why. So what? What is the decision? Okay. So for me, you have to have this chain and this system, whether research or commercial, that gets you from the data to the decision. And it has to outwardly be a very simple system because I have to sell it to the industry. Okay? So it could be very complex, but that has to almost be hidden. Okay? It has to be done well, but if I'm going to sell it to a grower, I cannot tell them everything. It has to be accessible. Okay, so you all know agriculture today, and increasingly in viticulture as well. You see tractors with lots and lots of different screens, okay, capturing lots and lots of different information or data, or storing it on lots of different types of media, from SD cards to USB sticks, to automatically into the cloud. So everything gets mixed up and muddled up, and it's a mess in many cases. So you have to sort this out. That's one of the big challenges that we have. And more information, more data, doesn't necessarily mean a better decision, okay? So if you keep giving me more and more information, I can't process that. If I can't process it properly, I give a bad decision. And this scares me about agriculture because I've worked in precision agriculture for 20 years, and in the 1990s there were lots of great ideas and lots of things being sold that did not work. So the growers, they say, it doesn't work, I'm not interested. And it was 5 or 10 years before they come back. So if you give them the wrong thing and they don't believe, they walk away, and it takes time for them to come back. And this is what scares me as well, that this will happen again. So, from understanding into action, okay, so this is just a very simple quality control cycle. So we have the ability to measure things, crop and soil and climate monitoring. We map that, we make a decision, we do an action, we measure that again, and we go around. And hopefully every time we go around the cycle, we get better and better. And so it's interesting to see this association society. Last year had a focus on crop, soil and climate monitoring, and this year it's on the mapping and the decision. So you're working your way around this process as well. So that's what we have to achieve. And the decisions that we make aren't changing, okay? The viticulture is not changing effectively. The information is changing, but we're still making the same basic viticultural decisions, and it still has to be underpinned by the same basic viticultural knowledge. And we can't lose track of that, because if you don't understand the viticulture, you don't understand the physiology, how can you understand the system? Okay. But the opportunity or the big challenge is everybody makes different decisions. So I'm going to make a different decision in my vineyard to what somebody else makes in their vineyard. So when with all this information has to adapt and has to change to how I make decisions, how I understand risk, okay? Because if I have one system and it doesn't account for how different people think, then it only fits one person or a few people. So there's a challenge in terms of going forward into this digital age of having services and systems that are adaptable and flexible. So they have this ability to be fuzzy or be soft in their computing strategies. Okay, and I don't think we really understand that as a big, wide industry, even as a research and academic industry. Not as well as we should. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about this project, Efficient Vineyard, because I think it just goes through how we're doing this in the US. So this is a very large project, about $6 million US, which is trying to get back to the basic idea of vine balance or crop load. So can we use all these sensors and just get back to crop load or vine balance, managing the vine balance to improve our quality, improve our sustainability within the vineyards. And it's a program that identifies there's lots of technologies we can take from wheat, from horticulture, and move into viticulture. There are some things that we cannot do. So we have to develop new sensors. And you saw some of those last year from the videos I saw. But then also, how do we take that data into information? How do we take that information and make a decision? How do we action that? So this goes right the way through this cycle. So this project addresses all parts of that particular cycle. So it's quite interesting. I can't obviously tell everything about it, but it's just to illustrate and show some of the things that are being done. So one of the things that I hate is I go to America in particular and everybody says, oh, I need to do some NDVI mapping. Okay, I need to do some PCD mapping or vigor mapping. And I say, okay, so what does the map on the left-hand side actually tell you? Okay, shows me the pattern, it tells me nothing because I don't know what that NDVI value actually means. Okay, yes, I can start to think about things and it challenges me, but that is not a management tool, that is data. Okay, so within the juice grape industry, we have a very simple system where we simplify the map, the middle one, and we stratify samples along a couple of rows. So we just want the growers to go into a couple of rows, take a couple of samples per row, collect that information, and then you have an ability to change the map on the left-hand side into the map on the right-hand side, which is the pruning mass, the vine size. I could give a vine size map to any viticulturist and they would interpret it and they would give me an action. Okay, a good viticulturist, obviously. Given an NDVI map to a viticulturist, they say, yes, that's pretty, so what's happening? Okay, so that's what so this works, and they do large areas, thousands of acres are mapped this way each year. Okay, of course, there are new sensors that do it more directly, so the PhysioCap sensor is one of those that's available in France, and people are developing other ones, which make it easier. Okay, and we'll get to those, and that's fine. So we should always keep developing. But we have the ability now to actually produce vine size maps. We have yield monitors. These are becoming more and more common. They sort of plateaued for a while, but in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a lot of interest re-emerging in yield monitors. A lot have gone into America in particular. And they give good data. They are not perfect. Okay, this is a system out of Australia. It's not perfect. If you look after it, you take care, you get good information. And what's nice about this sensor, what we proved, is that you can get information not only at harvest, but if you're doing crop thinning and doing very low loads, you can map this as well. So when we go through these crops and remove fruit in the season, if that's what we want to do, we can map the amount of fruit that we take off. Okay. So we now have, and we put, this is a slide which maybe I should have taken out, but I put in. This is about crop estimation, okay? The maps on the left-hand side are just areas where there's different responses. So we've taken some of those yield maps, some of those vine size maps, or just NDVI maps, some management maps, squash them together. We can do that, that's easy, we understand that. And then targeted our sampling into those. Okay, so we just take crop samples. And on the table here, it shows you, so the last 2 columns are the important ones. If we just randomly sampled in those blocks, our errors are what we typically get, 10 to 20, 25%. Okay, these are normal errors when you try to do random crop estimation. If you're using the information, you're down to sort of 5% error, okay? And this is not new, this was done 10 years ago, but it works almost everywhere. So we should be doing that. I know there are some systems out there that are available to help growers do that, but they're not well taken up as far as I can understand. I don't quite understand why, because it's such an important thing. This is a short video. So what's slightly unique about this is all the crop estimation in these systems is done with a harvesting machine. So it's a destructive sample. This is juice grape in America. They harvest about 0.5 or 1% of the crop. So a very small amount, okay? And they say, I'm happy to lose 1% of my crop if I get good information about my crop estimations. So they go out and they measure a section and they harvest it. And the yield monitor, once it's calibrated, you have to calibrate these systems, they can say, for this section, I got this many kilograms, this many tons per acre. Once the machine is set up, it can then go to the next vineyard and the next vineyard and the next vineyard. So suddenly within a day, they can just drive the harvester around selecting a couple of rows, points along rows again, so intelligent selection of sampling points, and suddenly one operator with a harvester can actually cover hundreds of acres a day in crop estimation, okay? And it's all logged, it's all saved, okay? Oops. Of course, destructive sampling is sort of, some people go, oh, don't take my grapes off. So the project works also with imagery, and there are other systems out there about counting the number of berries, counting the number of grapes, and the size of the grapes within a system. So this just drives through a vineyard and maps as you go. And it has works well in some situations, doesn't work well in other situations. But what it does do when it's set up correctly in the right situation and calibrated well is you get information on how many berries you have, the size of those berries. So in the middle of the season, I have a map of the yield, okay? And sometimes, not always, sometimes if you're very lucky, it relates also to the canopy and the vine size, but not always, okay? Not always. Makes it easier to understand. But what this means is I have yield mapping in the middle of the season, or maybe from last season. I have vine size. Again, I could get that sometimes, usually from the year before, but there are other ways of trying to get information in the season. And I can put those together to generate the Ravaz index, so crop load. And so now I start to think, I'm not managing yield, I'm not managing vine size, I'm managing the balance of the vine. And this is a better viticultural question. I'm not a viticulturalist, but this is my understanding. For all the people in this situation, this is a much better question. How do I manage my vine balance? Not how do I manage my yield, or how do I manage my vine size? And so what happens is you have a block, again, squashing this data down and making zones or areas where you expect similar responses, so the red, the green, and the blue. And we have a situation where the crop load in the zone 1 was 25, zone 2 was 24, zone 3 was 19.5. And they're all too high. So the bottom right-hand corner is showing you the red dots is where the system was 30 days after bloom. Okay? So 30 days after bloom, they did these measurements, and this is what they predicted. So the vines, there's too much fruit. They're overcropped. And they went through and they used that information to variably rate thin. So the system actually gets that map and says, in the red area, I want to try to take off more, and in the blue area, I want to take off a bit less, to try to get the crop load to move down into that balanced area. Okay? So after the variable rate control, zone 1, the crop load went to 21, zone 2 went to 20, zone 3 went to 17. So they dropped the crop load by 4, 4 and 2. Different changes. And you see the response in the bricks at the end. So in the controls, where they're overcropped, they can't ripen the fruit. When you remove some of the fruit, vine is better in balance, it's better set up, you get the better sugar content. It's a quality issue. These are juice grapes, as I said. 15.5 is the cutoff. So if they don't thin, they have to hold on. Keep those grapes longer on the vine. Keep those grapes longer on the vine to get the sugar, which means they have less time to recover before they go into the winter. This is a very big question about sustainability in this system. And what's nice is all that information is done by the extension service at the moment, and my job within this is to actually automate as much of that as possible. So the extension agent is actually going through and putting all that information together, generating a prescription map for the grower, which uploads to his console in the computer. He sets up his machine. So what it does is it just changes effectively how much the beta rods are moving, but you can do that through the hydraulics or through the electronics, depending on how it's set up. And the computer will now determine how much fruit is thinned depending on where they are in that vineyard. Okay? And map it. And all the grower actually has to do is make sure the equipment is set up, which is his job, and drive. So it's simple for him. He's not thinking too much about this. It's doable. The next slide is actually showing you the harvester setup. Did I click the button? Maybe not. There we go. So this is mid-season. For the crop estimation, they just shake them all off. So they drive slow, lots of force to get all the berries off. But when they crop thin, they drive fast, and they change the beating rod shaking. So it drops different amounts of fruit as you go through. Okay? All very nicely set up and all properly spatialized. And what actually happens is, again, what we're trying to do is move the average, so get the crop load in the right area and reduce the variability. Less variability, higher quality. So the histogram on the bottom is the histogram of the crop load before thinning. The histogram on top, the red one, is after thinning. You can see that it was shifted down by a third and the variability was reduced. So you get a much more even production within that system. Okay. And what's really nice is in that image that I showed earlier, that blue one on the left, there's little red plots. You can put experiments in. There's no reason why, with this technology, your system doesn't become an experiment. All right? Whatever response function you're trying to understand, what happens if I put different fertilizer on? What happens if I change my cover crop management? What happens if I change my pruning strategy, my thinning strategy? You can actually put out experiments within your system, harvest the results, and understand your response functions. It's not the response function of Superagro or Montpellier or Bordeaux or somewhere else. It's your response function. And it means that you respond to what's happening in your vineyard. So that's a big opportunity, but we don't have the tools to do that. Very quickly through quality, these are table grapes. So this project in the US is across all types of grapes. Again, they're interested in colour and how things ripen. Using the same sensor, the image sensor, we can count the berries, but we can also determine their colour relative to the grade. Okay? So that's just counting the berries. Oops. So grade A, grade B, grade C, grade D, you want to be picking C and D grade fruit. Okay? So as this sensor drove through the vineyard, it actually mapped on the black means that there's no 0% of that grade, and the yellow and white means that it's 80 to 100% of that grade. So you can see patterns of where the fruit is actually maturing and how it's maturing. And you can squash that down, which is my job to do, into maps that are just, here's a map of the percent harvestable fruit within that block. Okay? So based on the colour. But there's no reason why a similar thing could not be done on other quality attributes. So that map is taken, for example, on the 10th of June in California, in the table grapes, and they will say, there is no way that I'm going to harvest the entire block. All right? There's a difference in the south to the north. What are my logistics? How much fruit will I take off? How many boxes do I need for the certain areas? And more importantly, if I have information about what the weather's going to do for the next week, if I have information about what the grower's going to do with his management, is he going to put irrigation on, for example? If I have a good model of that grape colour development, I can actually say, all right, what will it look like in 5 days? What will it look like in 10 days? And I don't just do it for this block, I do it for 50 of my blocks. And then I say, right, so where are the logistics of my harvesting? How do I arrange my trucks, my people to harvest this in the most efficient way? So that's getting into this idea of predictive modelling. And what we're trying to move from is having a smart product. So if somebody invents something, it's a smart product, and then they sort of connect it or network it, and it becomes a connected product, and then they build it into a system. And I'd say that this project is almost building a system. It's at that level, that research project. But what you really want is a system of systems. So all of these different products have to fit together. Okay? And this is the big challenge. Okay? So systems of systems is a very, very rapidly emerging computer science area. Because I can model a system, but then how does it interface with another system? Okay? And that becomes a real challenge. The way that this is happening in agriculture at the moment is a fundamental shift in the information systems for farms. Okay, so even 5 years ago, nearly every farm management information system was a desktop system. You had your computer, you had your software, you put your information in. Yes, it's connected to the internet, so there's some connectivity, but the data is secure. You work almost in isolation. Okay. So it's safe, but you're by yourself effectively, okay? And the last 5 years, the change in this is enormous. So you're moving data processing and the software and all that work from your desktop into to a service provider, into the cloud or to somebody else running a server somewhere, okay? And then that information is coming back to you through the web. And so you're no longer tied to a desktop, you're now mobile. So that information can come to your phone, can come to your tablet, can come to your desktop, it doesn't matter. But this is a very fundamental change. And it means that you don't need to buy a 2,000 euro piece of software. You buy access to a web interface with all that software. This is fundamentally changing it. And it has advantages and disadvantages, of course. Obviously, all your data is going into a server. Potentially your neighbour is, the person in the next valley is, the person in the next country is going into that same server. So that data is now being pooled, being aggregated. So you're actually part of a network, or your data is. All right. You can still keep the data locally, but it's gone as well. So you need to understand that. Somebody else has your data as well. But because it's such a big pool of data, potentially big data or just large data sets, there are extra types of spatial statistics, extra type of processing capacities. So tomorrow you're going to see talks about, I imagine, all sorts of ways that people are trying to use these data sets to pull them together. They're not just one farm, but multiple farms networked. So big opportunities. And this is a conceptual model. So this is a company that I work with in the UK, and this is how they see it. So they mapped it out. So they see themselves as an agricultural service provider for information systems. And they want to build something that they sell to John Deere, that they sell to Pelonc. Okay? So they sit in the middle here, and they build a system, an information system that not only gets external data. So at the top, you can get satellite imagery, and because this is an agricultural service provider, they might buy all of France. They might buy imagery for all of France, and they're big enough they can do that. And then they start to pull it apart and sell it. And you, as a crop grower, may be out scanning, getting similar information using your handheld, your mobile phone, local sensors, and all that gets fed in as well. Similarly with weather, you could have a weather station on the farm, or you could be relying on weather systems, on online weather systems and weather models. But all these types of information can be merged together, and there are great challenges in synthesizing that data. So all that comes in, it gets into a geodatabase, and then that data mining becomes potentially possible. And the upshot is that that service then starts to give you things like crop phenological models, yield forecasts, fertilizer recommendations. All these things can start to be populated, all through a spatial web application. So to simplify that a little, again, that information comes in, and this is how it works. They give you a prescription, which you verify, but that prescription means that you know how much fertilizer you need, and that goes back into the system and goes to the supplier automatically. So this is this Internet of Smart Things, Internet of Things concept working, all right? And they want to be this. This ensures that you have sufficient fertilizer, sufficient supplies. You're not inhibited that way. That information can go to a third party, to your agronomist. They can verify it, your viticulturist, and you go back to the correct management. So you get so many more potential services. You get them fast, and they should be timely. You should get better decision making. And this is one system that's actually live in the UK. Any farmer in the UK can call up this company and say, I want a virtual weather station on my farm. Okay? And the weather models are good enough that you can actually map. If you map the difference between the temperature from the forecast, which is in dotted lines, and the temperature from the station, and you put it into a model. So this is a model for wheat. So this is the growth of wheat. And there are key stages where you want to do things. You want to apply phytosanitary or agri-chemicals, or apply fertilizer. These models are almost identical. There's 2 days difference in the prediction, in the error. So I can log in and say, I want a model, I planted my wheat on this day, can you tell me when I should be out crop scouting for this disease? When do I expect to be putting my fertilizer on? Give me a week's notice. And that can all be fed through. So alerts, etc. And that's a real-time thing. So the big question that I have, because I'm not a pure viticulturalist, is does viticulture have enough good viticultural models to actually make use of all this information? And I'm not actually sure there are bits and pieces, but I don't think as a system there's enough. But that's my opinion. Happy to be proved wrong. This is one such model, again in New York, which is to do with estimating berry weight at harvest, using weather data and historical information and sampling. Okay, sort of puts it all together. Right, so those services, oops, I should go back to those. I sort of mentioned those. You lose control of the data, and you have to understand that. And you have to, the topical thing with Facebook and the Russians and US elections and British elections, it's all the same thing. You have to be very careful. So my general advice to you is to make sure you know who's got possession of the data and who owns the data. All right? If you're a grower, you should always demand the raw data. There are some companies and some services that will never give you the raw data, and I don't understand that. to me, this is your data, and this is my opinion. So you should always get the raw data, because you may want to use it for another purpose. You should. These could have potential other uses in future years. So always ask for the raw data. Having said that, if a company takes your data, adds value to it, then they own it, or they have a right to it. Okay? So you lose total control at that stage. That's fair enough, and I don't have a problem with that. Okay? Be careful about, as I said, who owns the data. There's a case in the UK at the moment where one company was bought out by another company. This is a big farm management system company. Was bought out. The new company has a completely different rules. The old company wouldn't allow people to use your data for data mining. The new company just said, yes, we can sell that, and they've started to sell it. Okay? So this is the problem. The last point there, when I say don't give it away for free, it doesn't mean you should accept money for it or you should get money for it, but you should be getting some value back for it. So it could be a service. It could be something that's not value. Right. The Mas Numérique. So I don't know, hopefully that sort of showed you my thoughts about farm information systems and building a system in that American context, and then how I think things are going. The Mas Numérique has been set up by Observatoire Montpellier over the last 2 years, and it's kind of trying to address this as well. And this, I think, is a really fantastic system, because this is not a research system. And this deliberately has no context to work as a research platform. It will generate research questions, but it's not. So this is a digital farm in the south of France, just outside of Montpellier. It's primarily viticultural production, and it's set up so that any technology that effectively wants to be put into there can be put into there. So it's not just one system, it's lots of different pieces of sensors and technologies. And they're focusing on two questions from an industry perspective or from a grower perspective, which is to do with agrochemicals and disease, and with the quality of the grapes, what everybody's interested in, of course. As I said, it's not a research platform. It's very much set up as a teaching platform. So it's there so that the students at Observatoire Montpellier and Bordeaux or Paris can come and learn and see all the different systems in operations together. Just as important, or probably even more importantly, all the enterprises that put their systems in there have access to this. So they see how their system interacts with somebody else's system. Okay? So they have a service, they sell something. How does it interact with other systems? So this system of systems, trying to build that up. And it acts as an extension as well for the industry to come and actually see what's going on, which is great. So very quickly, there's 35 hectares of vines, some olives, some area of wheat and ground cereals, big broadacre. And it's a winery as well. So it's just not a vineyard, it's a winery as well, and they sell direct to the and these are the companies that are involved, and they're all putting either some level of in-kind contribution and putting their systems in there to be used. So for example, this axis where they're trying to understand crop protection, you have the different companies along the bottom that are giving services or providing input into those different boxes as you go through. Okay? So it's not one company, it's all those companies together trying to work together to achieve a good outcome and learning from each other as much as possible. And the same happens in the for the berries, except in this case, not only are they interested in what's happening in the vineyard, they're interested in what's going through into the winery. So there are sensing systems and all this through the fermentation processes as well. And it's just not the sensors. You can see down the bottom, SMARG in particular is interested in designing software. So these are the software solutions, how it all fits together, how that black box actually doesn't look so scary. I did try to actually launch this, but the Mac at the back does not, the computer at the back wouldn't allow me to go into the website. If you search visit Taylor Mas Numérique, you can look at it on your phone. So that is just the actual site. And you go in there and you can actually just walk around the winery, walk around the fields, see the information, okay? So it's live, it's not interactive, it's displayed. But you can actually have a look at that. So I do encourage you to go and have a look. But this is what it looks like. So you come into the situation and you have feet, so you can go and look at what's happening in the winery, or you can walk out to the vineyard and it shows you all the different layers of information that are coming in and being stored. Really interesting. Last thing, I've got 2 minutes. Is it okay? Personal viticulture, personal medicine. You've probably heard this term. So this is what I think is where this is going in the medium to longer term. Some of it's actually occurring already. We work on this precision agriculture agri-tech, which really looks at sensors that are physical sensors, optical sensors, work on physical principles. You will see more and more molecular diagnostic tools and multi-purpose molecular diagnostic tools coming in. And these will be linked with the high resolution information. Again, smart sampling, intelligent sampling. And that, I think, will be a game changer as well. I'll skip that one because I'll just talk about this. So this is one that we work with at Newcastle. So this is a molecular diagnostic tool for black grass weed. It's a lateral flow device, and what's interesting about this is it allows a grower in the field in 15 minutes to know if this weed has herbicide resistance or doesn't, particularly multi-site herbicide resistance. So I have 2 patches of black grass. So we use a UAV, we scan a field, we say there are populations of black grass here, here and here. We go and sample. This one is non-resistant, I treat it. This one is resistant but single site, I treat it with something else. This one is multi-site resistant and a real problem. I blow it up. Basically, I get rid of it, okay? But the UAV tells me there's black grass there. The molecular diagnostics tells me how I can actually do that, all right? And these things will be not just single use, but multiple use, okay? So it might not just tell me, I could use it for multiple different things. I'm just trying to think, something's got to make, it's all right. So you can have biomarkers for different things within the same test. That will change things drastically. Right. So viticulture becomes a system that is not just about viticulture or agriculture, it's really multidimensional. And we have to engage, particularly with the computer sciences, particularly with the chemistries. Oops, my apologies. And as I said at the start, we have to have a system and a decision system that doesn't scare growers. Because if we scare growers and we get it wrong, then we end up with a situation where the system doesn't work. And that's the big, big challenge. Thank you.